Interesting that you don't use your camera on live broadcast, even though you've kind of done the face reveal. I'm curious. This is not about the debate, by the way. I'm just noticing it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just how I've always done debates, and I haven't really invested the time or money to get a proper camera that I can use for streaming either yet. So it's just the avatar as it is for now.
Okay.
Cool. Well, I'm using the avatar today too because 4 p.m. the lighting in my apartment is terrible, so you would see like half of me anyway, and it's not necessary since I'm just the moderator. Okay, guys. So debate of the century is here. We got Kyler versus Wheat Waffles. This is going to be Blackpill versus I don't even really know what to call Kyler. I guess quote unquote Bluepill.
Omnipill.
Omnipill. Okay, there we go. But yeah, this is gonna be a lot of fun. So I'm gonna start off by posing a question. Let's just do like a quick opening statement for both of you guys, and then we just go into free flow conversation. I'll only step in if there is massive interruption or someone is completely derailing the conversation. But generally speaking, I'll be fairly hands off again, unless this debate is going off track. So just so you guys know my role, I'm not really going to be stepping in unless a direct question is asked to me, and it's like, hey, Alex said this 5 videos ago, and then I will answer. But aside from that, I'll generally be hands off. You guys won't hear from me much. Okay, so the question is this. It's a twofold question. Number one is, what do you believe determines a man's ability in the dating marketplace today? And two, how much of that is looks? So let's just go. Let's start with you, Wee Waffles, and then we'll go to Kyla.
Wait, so the first question is what determines a man's success in the dating game, and the second one is how much is looks.
Yeah, how much does looks play into that equation?
Okay. Well, for the second question, I might as well answer that first. I would say it's at least, I would say, about 60%. Then all of the other factors kind of get involved after that. And when we're talking about looks, like of that 60%, I would say like 40 of that 60 is the genetic factors of looks. And then, maybe like 15 or 20 is the behavioral factors. So, like going to the gym, sorting out your style, your hair, things like that. Mainly gym, but then also the other things as well. Like, I don't think there's much real value or merit to looks maxing outside of the gym. Like, you can do things like skincare and fix your hairstyle and fashion, whatever. But these are all like easy things. And if they're easy, the barriers to entry are low. So the return on investment is always going to be low as well. Like it takes a good 4 or 5 years, if not longer, to get the ideal male physique as a man. And the returns on that are massive. Like once you actually get to that point, depending on, what your other genetic factors like, your height and face are like, because let's be honest, if there's some 5'5" guy with a terrible face, him getting a gym body, like even if it's a perfect gym body, isn't going to be much of a compensation in terms of like increasing his SMV. Like he might have gone from a 3.5 to a 4 or something, which is still subpar and undesirable. But as for the other question you mentioned, what was it? How to be successful in dating as a man?
No, not that, but what determines? I mean,
What determines?
You can talk about that.
Okay.
As well, but yeah.
Oh, okay, similar. Well, I would say it's mainly 2 factors. Like I've thought about this, and when you say dating success, I'm guessing you're mainly talking like short term in terms of like how quickly a guy can like fill up his calendar with dates.
I'm not actually. I'm talking
girls.
about just in general. I'm talking about whatever that is for a guy, whether he wants short term, medium term, or long term.
You and I could probably agree. I think you and we are actually more fixated on long term relationships than short term. Anyways, we could talk about both, but I think you're right. We got to separate the two things.
Yeah. I think we do have to separate those two things. However, it is a little bit difficult to sort of pinpoint dating success when we're talking about long-term relationships because it's very binary. Either like you get a relationship or you don't. So that means that, a guy who might only have like average dating skills or like average SMV, he's technically on the same level as some Giga Chad with perfect other components because they are both in the same position that they both have a relationship. But, it's not necessarily looking at the quality of the girl or, the extent to which these guys could like get other women that are available because there's, undoubtedly an opportunity cost that comes with going into a relationship, which is the fact that you now can't, well, at least on paper, seduce any other women. Like some guys cheat and everything like that, or have women on the side or side chicks, whatever. But when we're talking about long-term relationship success, I'm generally assuming that we're talking about monogamous.
Yeah, let's
Yes.
just assume monogamy for now.
Yeah, okay. But anyway, to answer the actual question, I've thought about the biggest factors that go into dating success for guys. I think the two biggest ones by far is looks and numbers game. Like a lot of people argue like money and status, things like that. But you need to be in like the top 1% of these things in order to actually have any sort of leverage in order for these factors to improve your dating success. Like, to put it bluntly, like if you're not a celebrity and have over 10,000 Instagram followers, at the very, very least, it's very unlikely that you're going to be leveraging your status or wealth in order to attract a lot of women, unless you're going the beta boxing route, which is a bit more direct. I wouldn't recommend any guys doing that. It's kind of cheap and easy. But for the vast majority of guys out there that I see, like, in the middle and up, the two main factors that are getting guys the highest number of dates is definitely their looks and numbers game. Like, I've seen some 6 out of 10 guys completely clean up, that are having extremely good dating success, even though they're not, some Giga Chad, but because they would have 10 times more volume than the Giga Chad, then they're automatically going to have more success because of that. Like, they're going to get a lot more rejections, but they're also going to get a lot more success. Like, to simplify it in numerical terms, I would rather have 100 approaching opportunities with a 5% chance of each one working out, rather than having 10 approaching opportunities with like a 15 or 20% chance of it working out. Like, by the sheer law of the numbers, average to slightly above average looking guy is going to do better than a Giga Chad who sits in his basement all day, never goes outside.
Let me ask one clarifying question before we move on to Kyla. So in the very initially, you said looks is about 60%. I was surprised to hear you say that, because is that your position as of now, or has that always been your position? Because that's more of like a red pill type of position rather than a black pill. Typically, I've heard black pillers say 90% or 95%, or maybe at the least 80%. So I'm just curious about that.
I would be very shocked to hear that red pillars are saying that looks is 60%. I've never heard a red pillar say that before. They're usually talking about things like game or status and money. I've seen their videos on it. They will always, this is how the general red pill video goes, which will be titled something like, how much do looks matter in dating for guys, or like, are looks all that matters? And they'll start off the video saying like, oh yeah, like looks do play a little bit of a role. Obviously, the better looking you are, the more results naturally you're going to get. But you're mainly, going to have your success determined by the other things you bring to the table as a man, the things that you can build yourself on throughout your 20s and then reap the rewards in your 30s. And let's be honest, the vast majority of guys aren't getting any more attractive as they transition from 21 to 36. But the reason that these red pillars state that these guys are still able to get increased dating success into their 30s is because they build up their status, wealth, social circle, yada, 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 at the expense of their looks.
Okay, interesting. All right, let's move to Kyla.
Okay. How much looks determines success? I'll do that one first as well, since we did. It's going to be hard for me to narrow down on a specific percentage, mostly because I don't think that the data is there to make a very clear line about what percentage it actually is, especially because, as we've already said, what are we talking about? Are we talking about getting your foot in the door, getting the number, getting the date? Or are we talking about getting a girlfriend, getting a wife, maintaining a marriage, right? And so all of these things are going to probably weight differently, right? I would say, as far as like maintaining a marriage, looks as probably a pretty small percentage of success, whereas something like getting your foot in the door, I would weigh it way more heavily. I would say pretty privilege is real, attractive people are probably going to get more opportunities and more access to dates. But that doesn't mean that they're getting sex more, and that doesn't mean that they're getting like overall success in a number of metrics that we might care about. So I don't know how I would weigh it percentage wise, because all of these situations, I would give it a different percentage, essentially. What determines a man's dating value? I guess here's kind of what I would answer to that. David Buss did a really good study, famous study. Most people quote it all the time, from like, 1989, I think. I've got it pulled up, on the 37 different countries, about like what men and women seem to want in partners. 1989, yes. And what emerged across 37 countries universally is that men mostly want young and attractive mates, and women mostly want things like stability markers. So either education, income, sort of like potential for stability, seem to be the biggest thing that map on for women. And so I would say, for the most part, these types of things are going to weigh most heavily for women. Most women are selecting men based on whether or not they think that they can offer them stability. And what I would say is that women don't really actually use short-term dating strategies. Very, very few do. That's kind of what the evidence suggests. So most women actually are engaging in long-term dating strategy. And so most women are fundamentally prioritizing who's going to be a better partner long-term.
How was the data collected in this study?
In the David Buss one?
Yeah, the one where you said that women are looking for stability factors like education, wealth in men.
So they went to 33 countries on 6 continents. They basically, samples were obtained. In general rule, they tried to go to rural spaces. So they tried to be as random sampling as possible to make sure that their samples from each country reflected the population as best as possible. So they basically had researchers handing out surveys and all these sorts of things to basically rural things.
Okay, there we go. That explains it. That's why this study is worthless, in my opinion. There's a massive difference between what women say that they're attracted to and what they're actually attracted to. Of course, no women are going to say on a survey, even if it's anonymous for that matter, like a lot of people aren't even aware of their own bias. That of course they're not going to say that it's mainly like looks, height, dick size, race that they're looking for in men. They're going to say things that are more politically correct. That's just, human nature. And especially more so for women. Women have evolved to have this virtue signaling agenda more than men, because there's a lot more at stake with regard to them, like telling truths that, aren't exactly pleasing to hear, because if they say the wrong things, they haven't got any like physical defense mechanisms to sort of fight off the threats. But
So
men are going to be a lot more ruthless in their opinions. And
So if I'm-
this
can I
is
just
why
jump in?
So,
Can I
sorry,
just jump
okay,
in?
yeah.
So-
I was going to
just
say
so we
one
can
more
have
thing, but you
a
can
better
go.
like back and forth. I just want to ask you a clarifying question, and then we can like add on. I just want to make sure
Okay,
there's a bit of a better back and forth. So are you basically saying that you would wholly reject David Buss's like foundational evolutionary psychology paper on mate preferences?
The fact that it was based on surveys, yes, I'm willing to completely reject it. I think that the male part of the survey might be accurate, because if you go down the street interviewing guys, what are the most important things about their dating preferences for women? 9 times out of 10 they're going to be honest and say, oh yeah, like she's got to be fit, she's got to be beautiful, she's got to have a good face, nice figure, body. You get the idea. But women aren't going to say that, like, because I think the bias that women often have is either like out of ignorance, or it's out of like truth, but then they knowingly lie. So is that they're either like unaware that they're spreading misinformation, or they are aware that they're spreading misinformation, but they're doing it in order to sound virtuous and noble.
Sure. So if I could jump in, I think it's extremely scientifically like dubious to just disregard all self-report, but I'll just grant you it because I'd be curious how you feel about other methodologies. Because these findings that David Buss found in the self-reports has been repeated in things like behavioral analysis. So a really common way that people have started to study dating is by watching things like speed dating. And now there are going to be some issues in speed dating, but it's a lot more analogous to what dating relationships and dating dynamics are going to look like, especially on first entry, than like a lot of other things that we have. Would you agree with that? Like watching how the men and women interact, which men the women go home with, which men get the numbers. Would you agree that that's probably a better analogy? It's not based on self-report. It's exclusively based on observer, like researchers noting down which men are going home with which women, stuff like that. Would you agree
Yeah,
that
of
that's
course,
probably a
that
better
would be a
measure?
lot more accurate. But I'd be interested to see what studies you have to bring to the table then supporting your claim, because the studies I've seen on speed dating actually are in alignment with me. That women say, and I could try and trawl through my computer to find the screenshot I'm looking for that shows what I'm saying. But basically, it showed that women say that looks is, low down the list of priorities. However, when it comes to, the speed dating, the guys that they actually end up going for and choosing are the best looking guys. So I'd be interested to see your, studies that you say are actually contradicting what I'm saying, because the studies I've seen seem to like be in alignment with what I'm saying.
Sure. So in 2020, there was a study by Eastwick, yeah. Fickle and Eastwick. It was a speed dating thing where they basically got people to rate what they say that they would prefer in their partner. So unsurprisingly, men said that they would prefer a physically attractive partner, and women said that they would prefer a man with earning prospects. Not shocking there. And then we looked at who actually went home with who got numbers, and they also had to rate every single person that they met. They had to rate the physical attractiveness of their partner before and after the speed date, right? So to kind of this whole thing, and then they looked at who went home with who, what was this all rated on? So partners who ended up with each other, the physical assessment of each other was about the same. It seemed to be the case that both of them cared about how physically attractive each other were, about the same. It was 0.43 and 0.46 between men and women, non-statistical significance. So they actually both weighed physical attractiveness to some degree. Earning prospects were also the same. Men actually said that they slightly weighed the earning prospects a little bit more, but not statistically so in this case. In fact, when you controlled for a whole bunch of factors, including attraction, the main thing that predicted whether or not somebody would go home with somebody and get the number was something called positive reciprocity. Do you know what that is? Because it's a super jargony word.
No, but
Yeah,
you're
no
more
worries.
than welcome
Oh,
to
I can.
explain it. But
Yeah,
can you
yeah.
slow down when you're explaining it a little bit, please? I
Sure.
misheard, like, I don't want to misquote anything in future when I eventually respond to it. But I, some of the information that you said in the previous few sentences, like, I was missing some points that may have been really key. Like you said something about statistical significance on one of them, and
Yeah.
it was a little bit confusing.
Kyla, you have to
Sure.
keep in mind, We Waffles is ESL. They speak British over there, totally different language.
That's right. I'm sorry. I am. Sure. I don't know how to run that.
No one found my joke funny. Okay.
I found your joke funny. I was just about to make some more serious Brit Bonger claims, and I was worried about being accused of racism. So, which part do you need me to re-explain it? Or do you want me to just go on to the point, which is the positive?
Yeah, just re-explain the first bit and then go into the second bit.
Okay. So what they did in the study is they basically had everyone as they were walking into the
Yeah,
study.
I got that part, but just
Okay.
like give the actual results part. That's a
Okay.
bit that it seemed that
Yeah.
you glossed over a little bit. We didn't gloss over it, but it was just really fast, and there was a lot of like important details said in a short amount of time. I might have missed a couple of them.
Right. So they compared basically what people said at the beginning that they were going to be mostly looking for, what they were prefer, how they would prefer their partners, the hypothetical partners. What do you prefer to partner? Men said physically attractive, whatnot. Then when they were going home with somebody, when they had the number, they said, why did you select this partner? What do you prefer about them? And what we found is that men and women reported about the same thing, which is that they valued physical attractiveness and earning prospects about equally between both genders. There was no statistical difference. So men weren't weighing physical attractiveness more or less, neither were women, and vice versa. So this speaks a little bit to the fact that like women engage in a lot of copium, but it seems like men do too. A lot of the times, it seems like men say, I would want the most physically attractive, but in the reality, they're pretty content to settle with somebody that they find significantly less attractive, because it seems like men, while they value that, probably weigh other markers as well as valuable.
You said that those were the two biggest variables that they.
Those are
No. You said that there was this other variable
yes,
which you hadn't explained yet, but
yes.
two of the biggest ones were physical attractiveness and wealth, well, income potential, whatever. And
Earning
what are
prospects.
the correlation coefficients on those?
So they were effect sizes. It was a 0.43 and a 0.46. So these weren't correlations. These were effect sizes of choice. So
Okay,
they were, I think
what
they
does
were
that mean?
O&Ds.
Effect sizes mean?
Um, it basically is weighing how much these actually like imported to their. So correlation isn't the right way to describe it statistically because it wasn't a correlational analysis. Because at this point we're asking people's like preference. So it would only be correlative if like we were saying their physical attractiveness was correlated to them going home, but that wasn't really the question that was being asked. They were asked, "Do you prefer this?" And then weighting it between genders of who preferred which more. And there was no difference in which gender preferred physical attractiveness. With their actual partner. When they said, "Why are you going home with them?" They both said about the same level of physical attractiveness that mattered, and they both said the same about earning prospects.
Okay. I'm starting to get my head a little bit more wrapped around this.
Yep.
And then go into the last point that you said was the most important factor or whatever.
Yeah, so positive reciprocity is basically. Sorry, yeah, somebody yelled at me that I'm talking too fast still. Positive reciprocity is basically when, if I look at you and we're flirting and I smile at you and I indicate to you pretty strongly that I'm into you and you indicate it back, that's positive reciprocity. We tend to like people who like us, unless the person who's saying that they like us says the same thing to everyone. We really don't like that. So what we found is reciprocity that was specific. So if I was meeting with a man and I found him really attractive, but every other guy I didn't give those strong cues to, that guy, say I was on a date with a guy named Kevin, right? And I liked Kevin the most. Kevin would like me more because I showed him specific preference for him. He would
So it's
be more
basically
attracted.
choosing signals.
Yeah, to some extent.
Okay.
It's like we're both into each. We like people who like us, and we don't like people who like everyone because then we don't know if they like us, right? When we looked at who went home with who, positive reciprocity stood out against everything. It was much more predictive than physical attractiveness, earning prospects, everything. When you controlled for everything, positive reciprocity was the main thing that determined whether or not two people ended up going home together.
Okay, yeah. So what's determining these choosing signals then?
Sorry, what can you clarify what you mean by that?
Because surely if you're saying that this is the number one factor, you know, this isn't like a standalone factor. There's no way of like measuring that.
Yeah, they did eye gaze measurements. So what we do to kind of determine interest in things is we'll do eye gaze measurements. So there's kind of these measures that you can set up. You kind of wear like these little glasses where you can kind of watch where people look, right? So we do this with lots of things, and humans tend to look at things that we're interested in. So if there was high levels of mutual looking at each other, so both man and woman were looking at each other a lot, cueing that they were into each other, that was really good, unless, for example, one of the partners, so say it was Kevin, did that level of looking at all of the women. Then I, as a
Okay.
woman, would find that unattractive. But if he only did it specially with me, that was special.
Okay. Okay, yeah. That makes sense. But surely the underlying reason why people are going to be giving more direct eye contact, this positive reciprocity thing, choosing signals, whatever, is because they find the person attractive in the first place. Like you're basically saying at the
No,
moment
because
that
we controlled for
somebody's
that.
liking someone because they like someone. Yeah, but what's causing them to like that person? Like I would
Usually a
argue,
warm regard.
it would be the other factors that we've already established, the looks, the wealth, and so on.
Sure. So what I would say to that is there's another study, okay? This study was a really interesting one because it was a single lecturer. He gave the exact same lecture and speech. He just delivered it in two different ways. In one, he was super warm and he smiled a ton. In the second one, he was intentionally cold and he never smiled. When you compared the two, he also had an accent. When you compared the two evaluations amongst the students, they rated the warm guy significantly more attractive. They rated his accent as being sexy and fun. They said he was smarter, he was better, like in every way. Same guy. When he was cold, they rated his accent as annoying. They said that he was unattractive, that he was stupid and unintelligent, which is to suggest like a lot of times what we view as attractive has a lot more to do with the fact that people seem to like us because we like people who like us, right? So this isn't really about attraction. In many ways, what we find attractive is the people who make us feel more seen and like appreciated, right? Especially in the study with the eye gaze, they controlled for physical attraction. Every single partner was rated on their attractiveness, and people would select a partner who was rated by every other woman as less attractive if he gave more of that reciprocal, like positive eye contact, specifically with her. They would just like him more because they felt liked by him.
I'd be interested to see if there's some sort of tail off at the end, because I would argue that if a guy shows that he likes a woman too much, that actually works in the opposite of his favor, because it, you know, creeps more into like the desperate territory rather than like enthusiastic likableness. You know, you get the idea.
So they talk about this in the study, which is a really good point that you're bringing up. That desperation is typically cued, it seems to be, by what we call general reciprocity. So people who are really overly positive with everyone, right? Women can feel it. If a guy is going up to everyone being like, wow, you're so beautiful, I just want you. Like, they're going to see that and be like, okay, this guy is full of shit. He just wants my pussy. And it doesn't matter which pussy it is. He just wants one of them, right? Which, you're right. People don't like that. That was what the study showed, actually, is that people who came off really desperate because they were giving general reciprocity to everyone were very negatively evaluated. And it didn't matter. This is, again, controlled for attractiveness. It didn't matter how attractive you were. Men and women both kind of hated you if you came off desperate like this.
Okay, yeah. Okay, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, yeah. I understand that. Was there any other parts of the study that is relevant?
Nope.
Okay. Yeah, like I understand the study. I just think that my main issue with it is that there's, you know, not really been any sort of objective measure of what's causing these positive reciprocity, whatever it's called. You know, they're not actually finding out what is causing people to give the choosing signals to others in the first place. It's almost like, as in, you know, they're just giving to them blind, like as a roll of the dice. They're approaching someone in the speed dating event, and for whatever reason they like this person, and then they're giving them these choosing signals. You know, but I just don't think that's feasible. Like, it's going to be that people are giving choosing signals to the people that you know, they find attractive and have the other boxes that they tick that they find desirable in a potential partner.
So in this case, what you're saying of like how they didn't see what it's causing it, what we do know is that it wasn't attractiveness that was causing this positive reciprocity, and it wasn't earning potential, right? So because we controlled for those two things.
Then what is causing this positive
reciprocity? At this point, it's theoretical. Probably it seems to be warmth. We've got abundance of data that shows that when people smile a lot in general and are warm, that people like them more, right? There's a really interesting study that, I don't know if you follow Alexander Datesike, but he did this super interesting study on different faces from the Chicago face database, which are all faces that are like actors and models. And because they have to do like the passport pose, everyone rates these people as significantly less attractive, even though they're like actors and models and young. So like by all metrics, they should be rated like probably slightly above attractiveness, because in many ways, we like people that are smiling and warm. Like being smiley and extroverted is one of the best ways to make people to think you're more attractive, just by this.
Yeah, that's definitely true. But I still think that there's, you know, this is limited to some extent, because if there was some unattractive guy, like objectively unattractive, overweight, bald, you know, horrible teeth, but he was smiling, fully believe that women are still going to rate him lower compared to another guy who, you know, is one of these actors in Hollywood, you know, who's doing the passport photo pose.
So that's
Kyle,
actually really...
just quickly answer this question that someone asked. Ask Kyle what study defines attractive as.
At this point, so the eye gaze study was people's subjective evaluation of how they felt attractiveness, and then they averaged it per person. So like there was 20 guys, I think there was more than 20 guys. There was like 20 guys, they all had a name, they got assigned, every single woman who interacted with them rated their attractiveness, and then that all got put together and averaged for what that guy's like attraction was to women based on the 20 women there. So it's not like a perfect measure, but it's a decent measure of like whether or not people found
Wait,
it
say
attractive.
say again. How many people were involved?
I didn't say, I said, I guessed 20. I actually didn't write down the end size. I can look it up for you if you want.
Okay. Yeah. I'll have to like take a look at this study in my own time. It seems like we're spending a lot of time sort of just trying to understand it, you know, and figure out like what the study is actually showing. Because I try to like identify a couple potential problems, you know, that I'm seeing in this study. But I'll have to go for it in my own time, maybe after this stream, so then
Sure.
I can actually come back with proper feedback. Because it seems like we're spending a lot of time just talking
Sure.
about this, and you know,
Do you want
only
to talk
one of
about
us is actually
prerequisites?
only one of us is actually educated on this study at the moment.
Right.
Um,
Do you want to talk about prerequisites then? Because you kind of brought that up. Like being overweight is to me like a prerequisite, which is something that I think we semi-agree on, and then we probably differ on as well. Do you want to talk about,
what do you
because it's
mean by
not study related.
yeah? Okay, so what does prerequisite mean? What do you mean by that?
You actually talk about this, I think, a little bit well in your videos, where basically for attraction, it seems to be the case that if you don't meet like a minimum threshold of what people are looking for, especially for women, you'll probably never be considered, right? A prerequisite of attraction. Would you agree that women seem to have this?
Oh yeah, 100%. Like if you're not meeting the minimum standard that a
Yes.
woman has, like an attraction threshold, then you've got no chance. Like it's just going to be a
Yes.
downward spiral.
Right.
She's never going to change her mind on how attractive she thinks you are because, you know, you're not meeting that initial standard to begin with.
Right. So you kind of outlined obesity, for example. Obesity is actually a really, really interesting one. Are you familiar with the dual mating hypothesis?
Yeah, it's the theory that women want to, what is it, date the Giga Chads, you know, for one night stands during their ovulation phase,
Right.
and then on all of the other parts of their cycle, they're looking for a beta provider to raise the cuckolded child.
How do you feel about that hypothesis? I don't know what you think about it. Like, do you
I think that
believe
there
in
are
it?
elements of truth to it. It's not to say that every woman is engaging in that behavior. Like I can't really name many that do, but I think that there definitely is some, like, you know, degree that, you know, women are either engaging in this behavior or at least like fantasizing about it. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? Like, as in, I think there's a lot of women in relationships or marriages, you know, with some said beta guys. That doesn't necessarily mean they'll cheat on him, but you know, these women know deep down that like they are not with the most attractive guy that they have available as an option. Like they all women know that they can have a one night stand with some Chad for one night if they wanted to. Doesn't mean they're necessarily going to enact on it, but you know, they know that that could be possible, and the guy that they're dating isn't the most attractive guy available to them.
Sure. So in the dual mating, it kind of outlines two dating strategies that women would have then, right? There's kind of men they prefer for the short-term fucking, and then men that they prefer for like the long-time nesting. Would you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, I would.
Okay, and so then the short-term strategy for women is going to be like the hot Giga Chad, right? Probably what you would talk about. They're going to be maximal on looks. They're going to prioritize men who just look better or more physically attractive. Whereas the long-term guys are probably going to be more prioritized as like stability markers. Would you agree with that assessment as well, that these would be the
Yeah.
preferences? Okay.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so super interesting stuff about dual mating hypothesis. One thing I would ask you, do you think that when we're talking about looks, because you say women care most about looks, why do you think women care most about looks?
Because it's the biggest indicator of, like, you know, genetic potential in their offspring. They want to give birth to healthy children with the best potential to, you know, become strong and survival adequate when they grow older.
Okay.
Like, it's basically got its roots in in evolution.
Yeah, so I'm going to quote David Buss again, because I think this is a really important point for the Blackpill to contend with. Why would masculine symmetrical features be singled out while other heritable traits are not? For example, things like IQ, emotional stability, dependability, and personality are all highly heritable. In fact, IQ is probably one of the most heritable things. Why would women be selecting for things like looks when, for example, IQ might be a better metric of what we actually value, especially as a species overall? And IQ is a great sexual fitness measure.
Well, maybe now, IQ, like the importance in terms of like climbing the ranks in the real world is elevated because we live in a world that you're rewarded based on intelligence. But tens of thousands of years ago, I'm pretty sure, like, there might have even been some guys that are smarter than Albert Einstein. Like, I believe there was 100 billion people who have ever existed. And there's only 8 billion people on the planet now. So of that 100 billion, there's going to be some like giga geniuses with an IQ of 200 plus. Not many, but at least a couple. But I would find it hard to believe that these guys are the most, like sexually successful and passed on their genes the most, because in that time, IQ obviously it does help in survival to some degree because it's going to allow you to plan ahead. Just think of like how to better your survival and just things like that in general. But I don't think it's going to be as relevant as say physical strength, endurance, hand-eye coordination, hunting abilities, things like that. Those things would be the most sought after in mates in those times because that's the environment that they were in.
So let's maybe analyze this a little bit more closely. So when we're talking about survival fitness and specifically sexual fitness, what we're looking for, as you kind of said, is markers of good health, right? Typically, what we think is going on for sexual selection is we're trying to find mates who are going to have an opposite immune system of us because we're all mammals, which means we need opposite immune systems to make us better, our offspring stronger, right? And we're going to want to make sure that they have no mutations, right? Nothing that's going to go wrong later in age. They have general overall health and they have capacity for sexual success later on in life, right? In every way, IQ maps onto this. In fact, when we're talking about survivability of humans, strength and endurance and all this stuff is one of the least important things for humans. Humans are, bar none, absolutely not the strongest species. In fact, we basically traded strength and like most of our physical capacities for our brains, right? Being upright vastly decreased the speed at which we can like chase after anything, right? Being upright absolutely changed our capacity to climb through trees and do all these things. So if we're talking about like survival selection, in every way, humans clearly have selected for IQ much more than physical strength, because if we were selecting for physical strength, we'd be gorillas, right? Gorillas are much
I can provide some evidence to contradict what you're saying. And although some of what you're saying is true, it's a little bit misinformative because humans' main hunting strategy, throughout history wasn't about being the fastest or strongest and overpowering like the enemies and, doing a final killer blow, like a strong bite or a ruthless, like really powerful punch. Humans are just not going to win any fights that way or get food that way. The way that most humans, developed their hunting strategies was like humans are one of the most highest endurance species on the planet. I think they're only second behind timber wolves. Bipedal
locomotion is really good for endurance running.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
They ran things
and it's not just that as well. It's also the fact that humans, I believe, is either the only or one of the only species that sweats, and sweating is a massive benefit in terms of endurance running because it allows you to cool your system down, and like run for a really long time. Other animal species don't have that ability. So based on this, endurance, I would argue, has been selected for. And how can we tell that it's been selected for? Well, what's a potential sign that a person has bad endurance? Their body fat percentage. If a guy is 40% body fat, it's obvious just by looking at him that his endurance will be terrible. And that's why these guys are at the bottom of the barrel in terms of mate selection, because they look like they have subpar endurance, which, as I've already said, was the main way that humans were able to have their mouths fed, in terms of like hunting animals back then.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I would basically agree with you. So if we get back to the dual mating hypothesis, what we see is basically the dual mating hypothesis has been almost completely falsified. It's not real. None of the data stands up to it. David Buss himself has said, I was wrong. Dual mating hypothesis, if it's real, very, very few men and women ever choose to actually utilize it. It seems to basically be never utilized. In fact, when we look at ovulation, like basically when women are in their fertile versus their luteal phase, what we see is that they have similar preferences for the exact same thing always. The only difference we see in ovulation for women is that they just want sex more. That's it. But their preference as a partner stays the same. They're always selecting for long-term partners. In fact, the only thing that shifts as far as like attractiveness that they find in their partner is when they're fertile, they feel that their partner is more well-toned, or in some ways less body fat percentage. And when you kind of compare along the spectrum of attractiveness of what seems to really get pulled out as most important to women is body fat percentage, which is why I think you sometimes underestimate gym maxing, but I would agree that gym maxing is one of the best ways that you can improve your like sexual value to women is by being like low body fat percentage. As you suggested, there might be evolutionary reason for that with the endurance running, but also like the data shows women in general tend to prefer lower body fat percentage. They don't want obesity. And in fact, we see very similar results with men. Men also don't really like obesity, which makes sense. It's a marker of unhealth.
Yeah, when it comes to gym maxing, I don't think it's a complete waste of time. I think that there are benefits with it, but it's when I criticize gym maxing, I'm more saying that getting big muscles doesn't elevate your SMV anywhere near as much as getting low body fat percentage does. Like, being low body fat percentage is critical. Like, it's extremely important, and you don't need to go to the gym to be low body fat percentage. All you really need to do is just eat healthily. Like, you don't even need to do any exercise, or like just do the bare minimum, like walk to work. And chances are you're going to be low body fat percentage because your body fat percentage is mainly determined by your diet. But in terms with getting muscles and increasing size, you're not going to be able to do that unless you're training, doing hypertrophy training in the gym.
Mm-hmm. And eating lots
Also,
of protein.
to answer your other point about the dual mating strategy, you said that it's been debunked.
Yeah.
In light of some new evidence. I haven't actually heard about this yet. As far as my information base goes, before this debate, I've, still thought that like the evidence was saying that it does happen. Maybe not with every girl, but it definitely is a factor and is on a lot of women's minds. But I'll have to, again, similar to the other study that you raised, I'll have to look at this new evidence. Maybe you could send me it. So I could have a look at the, what you said as debunk the dual mating hypothesis.
Right. So I can send you all the studies. There's actually a really good lit review that is probably easier to read as well that covers all the data about dual mating hypothesis. But basically, in 2014, there was a meta-analysis that looked at 58 studies trying to look at fertile women and basically what they preferred. And the issue is that a preference for good genes just never really emerged. Ever, right? Things like the alpha high testosterone dominance or like male facial sexual dimorphism, male voices, none of these things were actually over preferred. The only thing is that when women were fertile, they just wanted men more. They just found men across the board more attractive and they wanted to fuck men more, which makes sense. It makes sense in the fertile phase. You'd want to have sex. It's kind of helpful to have sex when you're fertile if you want to have babies, right? There's also a lot of publication bias with the dual mating hypothesis, where for a long time, the only studies that were like in support of dual mating were significant findings because researchers don't publish non-significant findings. But as of like basically every study, we got Junger at 2018, Junger again at 2018, Stern at 2020, Stein at 2019. We have like all these robust studies that just basically show we've looked at masculine competitive courtship behavior. We looked at all these things. And basically, in general, women always prefer long-term mates. They're always looking for long-term mates. This doesn't change in the fertile window at all. And this idea of like the alpha gigachad being sexually preferred as a short-term dating strategy doesn't seem to exist either. Most women aren't interested in short-term dating. They're interested in long-term. There's a small minority of women that do seem to be what we call like sociosexual, just like there's a small minority of men that are very highly sociosexual. And these ones are very different, where they kind of use short-term dating strategies because it seems like they're mostly just interested in high volumes of sex. But this is just not most women. In fact, it's a very small minority of women.
Okay, again, I'll have to look at these studies afterwards. But like, I disagree with a fair amount of what you're saying, that most women are looking for, long-term partners, as if that's like rooted in women's like biological roots, when the evidence surely suggests that like the cultural impacts is massively changing women's attitudes towards casual sex.
Yeah, they're all having sex less. That's the crazy shit. The more we're having casual sex, women and men are just more sexually inactive in post 2020 than they were in like 1990s. Like,
But they're having more partners though. They're
no,
having
they're having less
having
sex.
it less.
No, they're just having less sex.
No,
in
yeah,
general.
they're having it less times with the same people, but they are having more partners, and I could show the data to back that up. I know
Yeah,
what
I
you're
would
trying
believe
to say,
that.
and
I would believe that
I
in
can
general,
understand
people
why
having
it's
more partners.
easy to confuse the two. Like, but it is true that both men and women as a whole are having less sex. Like
Yes.
in terms of like the number of times they are doing it per year, like that has decreased in the last 30 or 40 years. But that's mainly because people have smartphones nowadays, Instagram, video games, which are massive time sinks. So they're not, and they are, good sources of dopamine for people. So, they don't need to rely on sex in order to get their dopamine. But the number of partners has definitely increased, and I could show the data to back that up. I think
I'm
off the
not
top of my
disagreeing with
head,
that.
yeah, off the top of my head, I actually made a video about this a few weeks ago. That I think the number of women with 10 partners or more in the last 50 years has increased from like 2% to almost 20%. I can't remember the exact figures, but it's increasing. The number of women with 10 partners or more is on the rise, and it only seems to be heading more so that way. And, this is, not because of biology or evolution. This is all down to, um, cultural attitudes. Like society has now said that women are empowered by just having as many partners as possible, which I don't see the logic in that. But okay, that's what the wokest agenda is trying to get into women's minds.
Wouldn't this all be better explained by the fact that relationships in general are failing more? So, like, yeah, people have a higher body count because people are getting into and out of relationships at a much higher rate, right? There's a lot of people that date for 3 to 4 months. Nobody would be shocked if you're having sex with your boyfriend, right? Nobody's gonna be like, oh my God, what a slut having sex with her boyfriend. The problem is that relationships don't succeed very well, right? They're falling apart rather than saying like it's something as benign as like smartphones are making it easier to find new people. It's like, is it that, or is it just that in general relationships are failing? I mean, divorce rates are just steadily increasing, right? Like people seem to just not be successful in relationships.
I would say that the preciousness that women regard to sex has gone down considerably in the last 50 to 100 years. Like 100 years ago, if you lost your virginity, like, then that's, speaks volumes. But
True.
nowadays, well, at least, 20 years ago, like, you were only supposed to have sex in a relationship with a guy that
Yes,
you've
there's way
been
less
seeing
stigma
for
around
long term.
sex. Yes,
And,
I would
you
agree with
have to be
this.
dating for them like at least 6 months. But nowadays, it's not uncommon for people to hook up on the third date. Sometimes, I'm sure Alex can attest to this, the first date, and that was just so uncommon 50 years ago. And this is, again, it's all cultural.
Yeah. So when I grew up,
I'm not disagreeing with this. So go ahead, Alex.
I was gonna say, yeah, when I grew up during World War II, yeah, it was like really rare that I would get a one night stand. But fortunately, things have changed. So now my promiscuous ways have a place in the world. No, I agree. Yeah, it used to be much, much rarer. Cultural attitudes have changed. Also, birth control changed the game because back then, I mean, condoms have been around for like a millennia, but like, aside from condoms, right, there was more risk. Just the attitude was like, if you have sex, there's a good chance you're going to have a child, right? Or there was a risk of that. Versus now, it's like most people don't even think about like having a child when they have sex. So, yeah, a lot of cultural attitudes have changed about sex. Also, birth control changed the game.
And on top of that, STI protection. Modern medicine is so advanced nowadays. There's, essentially no risk of getting STIs, or even if you do, the risks are mitigated. And in the UK, the barriers to entry of getting contraception are so low. In fact, there's zero because it's free, and there's 15 methods that women can choose in order to get free protection. But that just wasn't the case.
I agree.
In the last century, because either it didn't exist in that time or it was just highly inaccessible. Like, I actually have a video on my channel called 6 Reasons Women Are Becoming More Promiscuous, and the one that Alex just stated and I've elaborated on is one of them.
Okay, so the issue that we're running into here is more partners and less sex is better explained by relationships failing more often, particularly when we know from all research that women always select long-term relationship strategies. A lot of women are having sex with men that they are intending to fall into a relationship with, right? When we're talking about high sex, right? The sluts, the 304s, the fuckboys, people having tons and tons of sex, the reality is that this is less than 10% of the population of both men and women. It's less than 10% of both of them. And they're having sex with each other. They're spreading all of the STIs, a lot of unwanted pregnancies. They're the ones utilizing abortions and birth control way more than everyone else. Most people are having sex in some context of an element of some level of committed relationship that is falling apart faster because people are bad at relationships. Most girls don't have a body count of 80 to like 100. That's not real. Most girls have a body count between like 3 to 6. I think the average right now is like 4.3, which you might be like, they're lying. Sure, but are men then lying to, like, magically just women are only lying when it's opposed to your position, right? The reality is that when we're talking about like these ran through for the streets people, it's a small minority of the population. And here's a question for you. Of these people having lots of sex, do you think that the year following that they're still having lots of sex?
Well, that sounds quite a loaded question. I'm guessing you're going to say no to that.
Well, what do you think?
Right, so a woman who's promiscuous in 1 year, will she be promiscuous the next year?
Yeah.
I would say that she's more likely to be promiscuous the next year than a woman who's never had that promiscuous year.
And you're probably right about that. But what we see as promiscuity for most people is like a young person transitory phase. Most people having tons and tons of sex right now, by next year, won't be, because a lot of people get disenfranchised on the lifestyle. Most people realize, oh, sex ain't all it's cracked up to be. It's messy, it's ugly. Women have bad sex regularly because women experience bad sex because they regularly don't orgasm, and it can be very painful. So a lot of people will be like, yeah, for the streets, I'm gonna have sex, girl boss queen stuff. And then by next year, they're like, fuck that shit. Not worth it.
Okay. Yeah, but then these women are still going to end up in relationships. Some guys are going to end up having to tie the knot on these women, and I don't think that's particularly ideal. A woman who's went through that kind of phase.
I would say that that's actually pretty ideal. If she's gone through that phase and realized it's stupid, that's a great partner because she's already realized
No way.
this choice is bad. Absolutely. Because sex is
No.
better always with a long-term partner. Everyone reports that sex is the best with a long-term partner. Ask any guy who's had tons of sex, he'll tell you the same thing. A lot of people
You
try
ask any
casual
guy
sex.
if they would rather have a woman with a low body count or a high body count, or a woman who's had a hoe phase that lasted a year, or a woman who's never had a hoe phase for a year. I guarantee you, the vast majority of guys would say that they would pick the women with little to no sexual experience. That's just
I
what
agree with you.
guys are hardwired to do.
Well, I don't know about hardwired, but absolutely I would agree that men would select the woman who hasn't had a lot of sex, for sure. Because
Yeah,
as you
so
said,
have
between
you
the
not
two
just gone back
people,
on your word there?
No, because I'm adding nuance there. I'm not going back on my word at all. What I'm saying is, if you've got a woman who was formerly promiscuous and has chosen to stop, that would actually be a better signal of the traits that you're selecting for. When you're selecting for a partner with a low body count, you're typically selecting for somebody who has enough, like, basically choice to basically say, I am not going to make risky decisions. They're not super impulsive, and they probably have some element of like wanting to weigh to preserve something that they think is valuable, right? All these things are what you care about when you're talking about low body count, correct? Like that's why you value it. It's somebody with like self-respect and self-control, right?
Right, I don't agree with your nuance. Guys aren't looking for women that have had hoe phases and they see that as a good thing
I'm
because
not
now
saying
it's
that
in
they
the
see it
past for
as
them.
a good thing. I'm not
No,
saying
but
they
you,
see it as a
okay,
good
yeah,
thing.
yeah, but you said that that is a good thing. Like
It
in
would
your,
be a
at
good
least
thing
your
if you thought
mind,
about it. Yeah.
it
So
would
if
be
you,
a good thing. Yeah, no,
sure.
but I don't
So
agree
what do
with
you,
that. That's
okay, let's break it
and I
down.
don't think
Why do you care about a low
very
body
many
count?
guys think that.
What
Sorry.
matters for that? When you're saying a woman with low body count, what does that mean to you?
Well, there's both statistical evidence and guys have countless anecdotal evidence of backing up the reason why they wouldn't want to date a girl with a higher body count. Well,
Yeah.
starting with
I'm
the
just curious what they
statistical
are.
thing,
Yeah.
is that women with higher body counts are more likely to cheat. They're more likely to split up, divorce, things like that. You're more likely to get cuckolded into a relationship, raise some child that's not yours.
Yeah, moral
You get the
character
idea.
failings. Yeah, moral character, right? You're worried that she's going to have bad moral character, she's going to cheat on you, she's going to have bad impulse control, and that she doesn't have the ability to basically sustain like current pleasure for long-term goals, right? Like it's a mapping onto a character flaw. Would you agree with that? Which
Yeah,
I would say that that's what most people say. Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm not saying men should date former sluts. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is what matters to men is oftentimes something similar that matters to women. We're looking for markers of good character. And I think body count is a heuristic that men use that isn't terrible. The issue is that what you're selecting for, what you care about with the body count, is a girl who has self control and a girl who is able to sustain pleasure right now for a long term relationship. Because unsurprisingly, long term relationships will probably work out with people who are long term thinking.
yeah,
What
but
I'm
I'm
saying,
not buying it. If a woman has had a promiscuous past previously, and then she says,
yes,
"Oh, I'm a changed person now.
right.
I'm looking for a um, long-term relationship." Yeah,
Mhm.
it sounds sincere, and yeah, like some guys might believe her. But I would
Yeah,
say
you
that's
shouldn't
out of
trust her
ignorance.
1 week. You shouldn't change her if like last week she was on her hoe phase and this week she's like, no, I'm a holy virgin. Absolutely, I agree with that. But what about a woman who's like, yeah, when I was 20, I like went through this phase. It was a really bad idea, but it's been 5 years now. I've really tried to like slow them down. Went to therapy, worked on my daddy issues, and like I really haven't even explored like serious dating for about 2 years. I'm wanting to get back into it, and I'm really more interested in like a long-term stable relationship. Do you think that that would matter as much, or would that actually map onto a woman who's probably did have a past of issues, worked on them, and now seems to have some markers of like all of these things that we care about?
Right, on paper, what you're saying, I can be a little bit more
Yeah,
agreeable with you, but in practice, it's just not going to happen. No, 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 no way. A lot of these women make it up as they go along, and they don't even know how they're feeling in these times, and they will say that they're finished with something, and firstly, you don't even know if they're telling the truth. If they say that I haven't had sex in the last 5 years, you don't know that. But if
true.
she was at least honest in admitting that she went with a bunch of guys when she was 20, now she's 25, she hasn't been with anyone in the last 5 years, I just find it hard to believe. And
That's fair. I agree that she would be the rarity, right? But the same issue you could say with virgins. Like virgins could just as much like lie about being a virgin. What I would be curious about, do you think you said two things that mapped on your original statement? What's going to be success for dating for men? Looks and numbers game. Just trying. So would you agree then that men should try to cast like a wider net for dating?
wait, so we're going on to a completely separate point now. We're talking about the original question that was raised at the beginning.
Oh, well, I'm going to loop it back to this conversation, but I'm just
Oh,
curious if you
okay.
agree with that.
Yeah. I think that guys, should like ramp up their number of approaches. At least if they, have the base SMV to begin with. If they're at the minimum of 5, but ideally a 6, 7, or 8,
Right.
then
So
they once they get to that level, they should ramp up the level of numbers game that they have.
right. So like the plan is cast a really wide net, get some skill, get comfortable with women, talk to lots and lots of women to kind of figure it out, and then start to vet, figure out who is a best fit for you specifically. Because what's a best fit for like a fundy Christian is probably going to be a little bit then like a metropolitan, but the strategy is similar. Cast a wide net, and then as you go along, you kind of start narrowing and selecting down who's the best fit for you. Would you agree with that? That's like a pretty good dating strategy?
Yeah,
Finding
that
like a
sounds
long-term
good.
partner? Okay.
Yeah, of course.
So I think it's really irrational and a stupid plan to select out all the girls that have a higher body count because the heuristic is body count. The important thing is moral character. Now, if you cast the wide net and you even include girls with a wide, high body count, you can select out the girls who are saying like, yeah, last week I was a slut, but this week I'm like a holy virgin. You can like start doing that vetting process. You don't even have to sleep with them if you don't want to, right? You can cast a wide net and then start narrowing down so that you don't miss out on like the rare cases of women who did have a hoe phase, but actually it has literally been 5 years. They've figured their shit out, because that might be a really good partner for you that these men would just be missing out on because of like a bad heuristic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it might be true, but I
You
still
can
don't think
catch
it's
the
a good strategy. No,
yeah,
but it's like
it's a great
a car.
strategy. You're catching the
No, it's not.
exceptions. Yeah, if you cast a
No,
wide net and
no,
then
because
vet,
it's still risk. No,
you
because
can
you
get
don't know which
exceptions.
ones. You don't know which ones are the exceptions. Like if you buy a car
Yeah.
and the car has an engine warning light on, yeah, there's a chance that this car is really good and it's a hidden gem. But the vast majority of cars with an engine warning light, it's literally telling you right there and then that you should not buy this car. And it's the same thing with body counts. All of these women have that engine warning light on, and it's just a safer, more logistical option to take to rule out all of these women altogether. It's not worth the risk. Okay, yeah, fair enough. A hidden gem might slip through your fingers occasionally, but that's just that's just running the odds. Like it's a negative free roll.
Well, guys
Trying to
already
date a
have to do
woman
this. Guys are
who
already doing this. You said it's a good strategy. Cast a wide net and then vet and narrow, right? So, like, what's going to be really good for men is, for example, as you're going through the dating process, don't donate your heart and commit to one bitch right away because she just gave you attention, right? That's a really bad strat. Cast a wide net. Hopefully, in there are exceptions. You're right. Most of them won't be. That's fine though. I'm not saying go with the women who aren't exceptions. I'm saying cast a wide net so that if for any chance there is an exception in your local area who would be a great pair for you, she's fucking hot, she's interested in what you're interested in, you are paired in a ton of ways. If you have a dating strategy that would just preclude her from the very beginning, that's just bad game. Just
No, but you
write
don't
it in and
know
then
if
get
she's an
good vetting.
exception. No, but you're banking on the fact that she's an exception, but you don't know that until potentially 5, 6 years down the line. All of a sudden, she's
Well, you
had a
would.
change of heart and she's back in on the carousel. Like you don't know that
Sure, but in dating,
information.
I think the analogy to a car is okay here because in this case, what you're saying is with dating, you get an infinite amount of test drives. Just test it out. That's what dating is, right? You can find out
Mm.
if she's an exception by testing out her moral character. If you've been dating her for a whole bunch and she says one thing and then you find out that she's lied, that might indicate to you that she's lied about a whole bunch of other stuff. Like, I just don't believe men are so stupid that if they're like dating lots of women and they're getting skilled with people, that they can't, after a couple months, vet out like which women are lying about like their sordid past and which ones aren't and stuff like that. Like, I feel
No,
like
but
that's
what I'm
part of the
arguing
dating
is that it's
process.
just a safer option to vet out these women to begin with. Don't, be chancing it by spending a few months or God forbid years giving her the benefit of the doubt, like constantly giving her the benefit of the doubt because you think she's going to be an exception. You're better off just getting rid of it and go to begin with, and just focus on the options that you do have who are going to be safer bets. Like tying it back to the cars thing, you're going to have an infinite number of test drives, but the cars with warning lights, engine warning lights, whatever, don't even bother test driving these. It's no skin off your nose. You forego the opportunity to test drive these cars, and yeah, fair enough. You're accepting the fact that you're gonna have some hidden gems slip through your fingers by swearing off these options to begin with.
Potentially a
However,
lot of
like
hidden
just
gems.
by
Yeah.
playing potentially a lot of hidden gems, it's very
It's
possible.
manifesting. The problem is that like it's
No,
not
but
safer. It's
no, but
dumber.
it's
If
still
men
a
are selecting
safer
out a
bet
ton of their
to only
options on
focus.
bad
Sorry, can I
heuristics,
finish
it's
my
like
point?
women
All right,
selecting
guys,
out
wait,
guys
stop.
who are accuracy.
One at a time, please. All right, let's go to we.
Yeah, I still had one more thing to say. So it's just a safer bet. Like if you actually map it out, mathematically calculate and run the odds, you're better off only dating, trying out the girls or cars, whatever analogy we're going to use here, the ones that have none of these warning signs. That's just a safer option in terms of the odds in both scenarios.
But it's a narrower net. You can throw
It's
a
a narrower net. Yes, it is a narrower
it's just
net.
manifesting though. It's a
it's-
narrow net based on really bad heuristics because you're comparing body count to a car engine. I would compare it much more closely. Like tire warnings that come up where like half the time they're a fucking lie, especially when you put on winter tires, they're always wrong. It's more like this. Men selecting out a ton of their options based on really bad heuristics is like women selecting out guys who are under 6 feet because they just want tall guys. I want a high value male as much of a manifestation as I want virgins. It's the same thing. I understand it. It's reasonable enough. Being 6 feet does map onto a couple of correlations, just like being a virgin does. The issue is it's a bad heuristic. You can do it. I'm not saying anyone's not allowed to do it. You're allowed to do it, but I'm not going to lie and pretend like it's smarter. It's definitely a narrow net and it's kind of mathematically dumb. You could do it. Power to you. But then like never drink because you might get drunk, right? It's like taking the most conservative approach to dating, which you can do. Anyone's allowed to do it. But I'm saying if we're talking about men who are already having bad dating success and you've agreed with me that they should cast a wide net, what we need to be teaching men is cast a wide net and learn how to vet. And I think men are smart enough to learn how to vet a little bit.
Well, no, because in the dating game, you only have to score once. So it doesn't matter if you cast a wide net and, find an option that you think is suitable in 1 year, or you increase the number of prerequisites you have, such as having a low body count, which gives you a smaller net, and now it takes you 3 years to find the girl that you're actually, finding desirable. But once you go through that filtration process,
Right.
the end result, statistically, according to the mathematics of the odds, is going to be a higher quality woman, or at least a woman that will be more likely to be successful in the long term in a long-term relationship. Because you only have to score once. There's no rush, but there's no point going into it like dropping the majority of your standards, which are rooted in logic, just for the sake that you can have a wide net, and therefore you can score that goal once within a year, instead of like delaying it a little bit and taking 3 years. Do you see? Do you kind
I
of
do
see?
see. I'm agreeing with you. What I'm saying is your math's bad, right? You have the best chance
How?
of the best because if you have a really wide net, you can take 3 years with a wide net. You have more options. You're more likely to get a better score. There might be girls that a whole bunch of dumbasses have used this bad heuristic that have passed up who is a fucking gem that you can get because you're willing to wait. You're willing to test things out. You're not going to just establish arbitrary prerequisites that don't actually predict better success in individual relationships. It predicts less options. All you're saying is men limit your options. And it seems like with this singleness crisis that men don't need advice of limit your options more, but they need advice on how do you vet a whole wide range of options. That's what men need to learn.
Hold on a second. When I look at the men out there on a daily basis, whether or not like their standards are either too low or too high, the vast majority of guys I see, their standards are through the floor, and they need to have a little bit more self-respect. Like the reason we're having this whole simp epidemic and the inequality in the dating market is actually mainly caused by men. It's all of these guys that have zero standards, zero self-respect. They would date and select for any girl that gives them the slightest ounce of attention.
Exactly. It's the first girl that comes around. That's bad vetting. I agree with you. But the issue is that they're just committing to the first thing that comes around, which is terrible. Terrible dating strategy. Awful. I agree with that. But that is an adjunct to what I'm talking about.
Yes, well, I don't know if that necessarily is, because I'm saying that guys need to increase their standards. You're saying that they need to lower them.
No, I'm
But
saying
guys'
that they need
standards
to
are
know.
already as low enough as they are.
No, I
So
said that
if
they
I
need to
give them
vet
advice,
properly.
all right, if I give a guy advice, whose standards are through the floor and say, hold on a second, mate, like, this isn't working out. Like this is a terrible dating strategy. You need to implement some actual standards here, such as don't date women with high body counts. Don't date women that are, open to polygamy or just any random crazy shit like that. Don't date women who do drugs or smoke cigarettes. Even if she's like, a lot of people would think that smoking cigarettes isn't that bad. No, it is bad. It's not that necessarily smoking is that bad, but it's what it entails. The women that I know that are smoking cigarettes more often than not, like it goes hand in hand with all of these other issues and problems, just bad relationship traits. Like if guys start implementing all of these standards collectively, that is, it's far-fetched, I understand that, because most guys, just aren't going to change. They're too thirsty for it to ever work on a global scale. But if all guys did, just theoretically speaking, then we would see a more grounded, equal dating market, and it would actually benefit all of the guys out there collectively.
Right. So your advice is narrow your net and score once. My advice is better yourself, up your game, date around, don't give your heart to any one girl, find a girl that's actually right for you, and then wife her up. That's my advice. Your advice is, well, narrow your net and hopefully you score. I don't know.
Yeah,
that can be your advice. I'm just telling you, you're underserving people by giving it. You can give it, and that can be your dating strategy. That's fine. Anyone's allowed to do whatever they want in relationships. What I'm saying is mathematically, you are giving men a worse strategy.
Well, if you want to simplify things as, as boiled down as possible, then yeah, that's the outcome you come with. But, you just overlooked all of the other points that I have raised and nuance that I've stated there. And I don't even think that what you said is particularly accurate anyway, your simplification, because, your strategy, you're giving the benefit of the doubt to a lot of these women who I would say have yellow flags, and maybe the thing with yellow flags, you don't know if it's a red flag, you don't know if it's a green flag until you've actually settled down and committed to them for 5 years.
And I give the
potentially
same
got married or had kids, and then boom,
Yes.
if you do that and it actually turns out it was a red flag, then you're
that's
you're
not
done
what
for
I'm
at
saying,
that point.
right? That's not what I'm saying at all. You've just like now baked in a whole bunch of stuff. I said, yes, when you see yellow flags, take note of it. It's worth noting, but don't count somebody out just on that. And I give the same advice to women. I would say the obsession with virginity is the same as women obsessing over men over 6 feet. It's stupid. I understand it. It's somewhat rational, but it's dumb. It's a really bad strat. It maybe is a yellow flag, right? That he's short or that he's insecure. Those are all yellow flags. However, they're not red flags, and you shouldn't treat them as such. You should date them for a while and give them lots of test drives. I'm not meaning just sex. I'm saying, like, try them out. If a girl is lying about her exes, any number of them, that's not a yellow flag. That's a red flag. A girl who's being honest, being like, yeah, I slept around a lot when I was younger, but now I'm on a different phase. That's not necessarily like, that's for sure not a red flag. You might feel like it's a yellow flag because you don't know how true it is. But like, if she's actively lying to you about like her body score or like any of these things, she's lying about her past relationships, that's a red flag. And I'm fine with treating that as a red flag. What I'm saying is don't treat yellow flags as red flags. That's a really bad dating strat for men and for women.
Yeah, right. No, but just to be clear, I'm not one of these no hymen, no diamond guys. Like I'm not glorifying virginity and thinking like, oh, if she's not a virgin, then she's not an option. Because I do think that that's a bridge too far. Like how many women are virgins out there nowadays,
Children.
especially
Mostly
like
children. Yeah.
those that are over the age of 21 is
Right.
I don't know. I don't know the exact data, but I would guess it's like 5%, and that's just way too much of a small net. Bearing in mind that this isn't going to be the only standard, that you have. Like, there's going to be other things. There's going to be a lot of the 5% of virgins that have all of these other yellow flags. In which case, you'd also need to disregard them. So, after it's all said and done, you might be holding a net which filters down for like 0.01% of women. It's just unfeasible. You're waiting on a unicorn. It's just not going to happen. Like, I'm not saying to take it to that extreme, but
Yes, you're not
rule out the women. rule out the women that have body counts of. I'm actually going to provide a more nuanced video on future of this, but like giving like the a more grounded in reality like response about what is an acceptable body count. But just as a general simplification now, like rule out the women with body counts of 10 plus, like especially if they're under the age of 22. Like that's just obscene based on her age.
I mean, I'm going to be honest. I think that advice, like 10 body counts under the age of 22, she hasn't had years to figure out if that's okay. She hasn't had time to figure out. I think that that's an okay thing. And just to be clear, I don't think that you're like undead chronic. And I think that you actually give lots of good advice. I appreciate, for example, I've not once seen you do a video of like analyzing people's faces and seen you lie. And I think a lot of people in this sphere are very motivated to lie to men, right? And I appreciate that, right? You give a bunch of good strategy, right? Looks maxing is good. Niche maxing is good. I think you probably undervalue gym maxing, and I think you slightly overvalue niche maxing, just like not that big of a deal.
Wait, say that again. I overvalue or undervalue niche maxing?
I would say you overvalue niche maxing.
Okay, and then what was the other thing that you said I overvalue or undervalue?
Undervalue gym maxing. But other than that, I think you give a lot of good advice, right? I think the saying like a girl with 10 body count who's 22, I also think that that's a really big flag. I'm not advocating for that either, right? At all. I'm talking about a 26-year-old girl who's more interested in woman, who's more interested in settling down, who in her 20s maybe had a higher body count. Maybe she had sex with like 6, 7, maybe even up to 10 people in her early 20s, but it's been 2-3 years. She's gone to therapy. She's recognized it's an issue. I would say, don't count these people out because you might miss out on a really good partner and there's not really any need to, right? Your advice of like 22 and 10, I think that that's reasonable enough, right? That's like a pretty extreme thing. But yeah, I think you're really honest with your viewers. I think you're a really good read on attractiveness, to be honest. And that's a rare thing in this space. So I don't want you to hear that I'm like trying to villainize you or your content or say that like you're anything unlike undead chronic or any of these like kind of characters.
Yeah, of course not. I'm not insinuating that you are, thinking that I have any of those beliefs. But anyway, I think we've exhausted this topic.
I want to raise one more point about the body count thing before you guys move on, because I think this is a point that has been mentioned. Here's one of my issues with the with like a severe focus on body count is that I feel like it encourages girls to lie to you, right? So a girl will quite often, if she likes you, tell you what you want to hear if she thinks it's a big issue for you. Because there's no like you're not going to verify. Like you ask her what's your body count, she says 3. You can't verify that, right? You just have to take her word for it, right? But again, if the woman senses that like this is a big thing for you, based on how you talk around the topic, there's a good chance that she'll just lie to you, and you'll have no way of knowing.
Yeah, I would never tell a woman to her face like, "Oh, yeah, I would never date a woman with a higher body count." Oh, by the way, what's your body count? Like, that's just got no logical following. I apologize if some people think I'm being arrogant here, but I think that there is quite a consistent and accurate way that you can verify information from women and essentially get to the point where they never have to lie or think that they lie.
What is the method?
Well, you just come from a position, you ask them things with as minimal judgment as possible. And it does take a lot of reading of the situation and like their character and how comfortable they are to begin with about answering certain topics. But you test the waters with that. Like a lot of women, you can just read their body language. If you ask something that's a little bit more personal, like, oh, when was the last time you had sex or something, you can tell straight away if like they're uncomfortable with answering that question. Just like if they're delaying their response, if they're just uneasy about it. Like it's common sense to read their body language.
Would that be an indicator of high body count? Sorry, just to understand.
No. So I'm just saying, like, if she was uncomfortable with answering that question, then you then wouldn't go on to ask for a little bit more, like higher of a period of time, what her body count is until you've got to the position where she now is more comfortable. And the way you do that is, well, at least my strategy is that if you can tell a woman is like uncomfortable, if you ask her when was the last time you had sex, and then you can tell she's giving the uneasy response, then you'd be like, oh, it's no big deal. Like I don't really mind. I'm not going to judge. I'm just asking. I'm just curious. You say something like that, and then a lot of the time she will just give you the response then, like the actual answer, and there you've managed to get information and you've made her more comfortable as well. Or alternatively, if she still doesn't want to answer the question once you've done that, the thing you then want to do is do a lot more talking yourself. Like the worst thing you can do when talking to an uncomfortable girl is just ask her a bunch of questions, and because it comes off as like you're interrogating her. And this is a big mistake that I see a lot of guys often make, because they see a girl is untalkative, uncomfortable, and then they think like, oh, I've got the solution. In order for her to talk more, I should ask her questions, and she'll have to talk, and then she'll have to open up. But no, it's a stupid strategy, because all that's going to happen is she's just going to feel interrogated, and she's going to open up less to you, because you've revealed no personal information about yourself, but you're expecting her to reveal all of this personal information about herself. And there's just there's a massive imbalance of that, and the way that you get around it is, so if a woman is like being uncomfortable with answering the questions that you want to find the information for, then you just start doing a lot of talking. Like, tell her the wackiest, craziest shit that you've done in your past, in your sex life or whatever, and then once you do that, she'll realize, oh, it's not actually a big deal. Like, this guy has just exposed so much vulnerability now. I've got nothing to hide, because he's just told me a load of stuff, and my information isn't anywhere near as like crazy as his, so I might as well tell him anyway. Like, this guy's really honest and genuine. Like, I've got no reason to hide anymore.
We Waffles. So
Hold on.
let me just. Yeah,
Hello?
go ahead, and then I'll make.
I was just gonna say, I think that this is really good advice. It's just weird to me because I feel like this is basically what I was saying, right? When I'm saying don't count out a girl with a high body count, I'm not saying jump into bed with her immediately and stick a ring on her finger. I said figure it out. Ask them philosophical questions, right? Figure out their worldview. Talk to them about situations. Get them comfortable. Tell them about your worldview. Like, everything you're describing here, I think is really good advice for men, which is about learning how to vet women in a way that make them feel comfortable, which I think is good advice for everyone. People need to learn how to vet partners, which I think is great advice. Like, genuinely, in a non-judgmental way. If she feels uncomfortable, you back off the question, you wait till you have more rapport. I think this is all like genuinely phenomenal advice. It's just interesting to me because then it sounds like we agree, because I'm not recommending that men like find out that the girl has 10 partners in the past and be like, oh great, you're a reformed slut, let's like wife up. I'm recommending that guys take their time. If they've got a yellow flag with a woman, maybe you go even slower. Make sure that you're vetting, try to figure out if their lifestyle matches what they say that they value. I think that these are all great pieces of advice that you're giving. I just then don't know how we differ, because the only difference I would say is if she says 10 and looks kind of embarrassed about it, I would say you probably shouldn't just walk away from that. If you match on a whole bunch of other stuff, you should vet it out a little bit more and see what that actually means. 10 last year, 10 last week. What does that mean? Would you agree with that?
Let me just make one more point, and then I'll kick it off to you guys. So I actually agree with everything you said, Wheat Waffles. However, here's my concern. I feel like everything you mentioned is kind of more like advanced stuff that requires good social skills. But I feel like a lot of these guys, like, I'm confident in my ability to be able to, the majority of the time, accurately read a girl's body language. But I think a lot of guys, especially the guys who are like really socially awkward, don't have much social experience, it's like they're not going to be able to do what you're describing, which is subtly navigate around the girl's body language and read between the lines. Like, I think a lot of these guys are not going to be able to do that. So for them, it's just like, like they're going to be lied to, and they're going to believe that. So I feel like that's kind of like when you're describing something that, while it's a good thing to learn how to do, most guys can't do that or don't have the skill or the social intuition to do that.
Well, I think they need to pick that up over time. Like, you're not going to become an expert in reading body language, just from listening to what I said, or watching a couple YouTube videos about how to get honest responses from women. Like, it will take time to sort of like calibrate yourself, and adjust to like figure out when a woman is like giving you those cues of like uncomfortableness. Like, and I think this is how numbers game, the thing I talked about at the beginning, can actually have like exponential returns, because the more experience you get, the more numbers you do, the more calibrated you are like as an individual. So it actually increases your rate of return with the women that you already are talking to.
Yeah, I guess like my one last point would be I feel like there's easier metrics that guys who don't have good social skills can look for. Like, for example, reliability, right? Like that one's pretty easy. Is a girl like typically reliable? Does she show up when you guys make plans, or does she not? Like for me personally, I want a girl who's very reliable, right? So if I'm screening a girl and she's consistently late and making excuses, right? Like that's a red flag right there. And that's one that doesn't really require any reading between the lines. That one's like super obvious. So I guess I would just say that for a beginner, there's like easier metrics that you're going to be way more likely to gauge accurately than whether she's lying about her body count. My last point.
Okay, yeah, but like I'm assuming that we're not even gonna consider these girls that are extremely flaky and unreliable. Like, I'm not even considering them. As the minimum.
I think you give people too much credit.
Well, maybe it's a different culture in America or something, or at least in Miami, where everyone's sort of like got this trample on everyone else mentality in order to elevate themselves. Maybe people are just a bit more respectful over here. Because I know you said that the dating scene, especially in Miami, is a bit like fucked because the amount of people that live there is insane, and like everyone's trying to reach the top and clout chasing, and you know it more than me. You could probably explain it better to me as well, of like why the dating situation is so bad over there.
Yeah, another factor I would focus on is entitlement, right? That's also a really easy one. Like when you're starting dating process, does a girl like demand like I want to go to a fancy restaurant, or like you have to take me out, or you have to do this, or like that's another easy one that you can pick up on. And the more entitled a girl is, the worse of a partner I believe she is, at least according to my criteria. So yeah, my whole point is that I hear what you're saying, and I agree with the methodology. I just think that most guys are not going to be able to accurately gauge what the girl's lying about her body count, and they're going to be also keep in mind that a lot of people hear what they want to hear, right? So if like you want the girl, like the girl's giving you sex, you haven't had much options, you like her, right? You hoping that she has a low body count if that's something that's important to you, right? So people delude themselves like all the time. Very few people are capable of like actually like taking themselves out of their body, being very self-aware, and looking at things objectively high percentage of the time. But yeah, that's my last point. I'll let you guys get there.
Yeah, of course. You see plenty of guys, fall into that trap. Like, if they were giving advice to one of their guy friends, about a girl that they're dating, whether they should get together with her, stay with her, break up with her or not, more often than not, they will give a completely different response if they were the friend giving advice compared to if they were actually in that situation themselves. Because what I've often seen is guys, if they're actually like already dating this girl who's showing a gazillion red flags, they would still delude themselves and be like, oh no, but she's got all of these other things, and it's not really like a problem. Her body count is just because of XYZ, like it's not really bad. But then if he was the friend giving advice, and he would say like, mate, what the hell are you doing? Is everything that you need to know is laid right on the table in front of you. Like, you need to get rid of this girl immediately.
Sure. And like, I mean, I would agree with you about these things of like vetting philosophy and stuff, and like testing what these women think about the world. The issue is that what I'm saying is like, when you're telling all of these men, particularly probably the men that watch you and me and Alex, to like be very concerned about body count, I think it's a really, really bad metric, because there's so much like individual pieces that come into this, right? Like when you're talking about somebody with a body count, I think what you're really trying to talk about, like we said, is moral character. And I think there are tons of ways to ask about and figure out moral character, like Alex pointed out, that are going to be better tests of whether or not there's somebody you want to be interested in than just a body count. Like, there'd be nothing worse to me than a guy who like watches like you or me or somebody else, is with a girl, they click, she's kind to him, things are good, there's like some level of reciprocal like respect and mutual trust being built, their personalities are really similar, like in every way things work, and then he finds out that she had like 15 partners in the past, and he just fully writes her off because of that. Like, that would be the worst case scenario. And it sounds like you're trying to add nuance and being like, probably don't do that, like probably treat it like a yellow flag. I just don't want to give people like really bad metrics of how to determine your partner, because I'd be curious, how many girls do you think actually have a 10 plus body count at like the age of like 25?
Oh, I can actually get you the exact figure for that. Wait, not by the age of 25. I won't be able to answer that part of the question, but I know I've
Well, by
literally
some
got
age
the
will matter, right? Because if it's like
yeah.
10 plus body count for like 40-year-olds, that's going to be a really different conversation.
Right, I've actually got the data right here, right now, because I know exactly what video I said
Just
it
to
in.
clarify, it's
Yeah,
self-reported data, right?
So 18% of
Yes.
women age 18 to 29 have 10 plus partners, and that's the highest it's ever been in the last 30 years. In 1989, it was only 8%, and this year it's 18%. So
So
it's
18% is,
increasing.
yeah, it's increasing, but still really small. Do you think the guys
Well,
that
that's one
watch,
in 5 women, isn't it?
sure, but do you think the four men in our, like, do you think that the men that watch us are running in circles with these women? Because what we
Well,
see, well, hold on, what we see
it's
with,
okay.
hold on, if I could just finish. What we see with sociosexuality is that people who are high sex havers interact with each other. They spread almost all the STIs, they have almost all the sex. And it's about the same percentage of men and women, right? So, like, when we're talking about these women, are these even the women that any of our viewers are interacting with? Because if it's not, it's an even worse flag to give your viewers because these women aren't even in the circles. And of the 18%, I'd be super curious of the details in all of this. Is this 10 plus partners because they've been in 10 relationships? In 11 years, being in 10 relationships is high, but it's not great. That could be a year-long relationship consistently, right? So it's like, what does this 18% actually entail?
Oh, I would say that the majority of guys that are watching us are interacting with these women, these 18%. And in fact, in terms of the effective dating market, that 18% is probably more like 60% in terms of the effective dating market because there's a
How do you,
huge selection bias here. Um, right off the bat, like, we can assume that the majority of this 18% aren't going to be in relationships. Meanwhile, the women who are in the other 82%, that have less than 10 partners, a lot of them are going to be in relationships, which right there and there,
do we know that? Wait, hold
decreases
on.
the. Well,
Hold on.
that's.
Can I stop you
I
too?
think that's a
Well, Tyler,
reasonable
let him finish.
speculation to
Well,
make.
because I think you're about to break down a whole bunch of selection biases, and I can just write them down instead. But it'd be easier, I think, if we went through them one by one.
Yeah, that's fine. Let's do that.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
Is that okay with you?
that's
If you want,
yeah,
I can
that's
write them down
completely
as
okay
notes.
with me. But that
Okay.
first selection bias I gave, I think that's not an unreasonable judgment to make.
I
I think
would.
that's pretty obvious, to be honest.
You
Like
think so?
a woman that's in a relationship, you know, chances are she's going to have a lot lower of a body count because she might have been in that relationship for like 2, 3, 4 years. And if she's like 22 years old, she's not even been one of these single girls that's had time to be hitting it up at the nightclubs and, taking guys home every other weekend.
So that is, I would not say that that's reasonable to presume. When we're talking about 18% in a 10-year gap, I'm curious to know of the women saying between 18 to 29 that have 10 plus, I'm going to guess that probably upwards of most of that 18% is represented by women between the ages of 25 to 29 because they've just had time to have lots of sex. That would
Oh
be
yeah,
my
of
guess. I
course.
could be wrong. Okay. So that's
Yeah, yeah.
already going on. You're also now then assuming that these women are probably not in relationships. I don't know if there's any good evidence to suggest that, first of all, women that would be older having this higher body count also aren't in relationship because what we actually see is women between 25 to about 35 are some of the most likely to be in relationships. So it's highly probable that this 18% does include at least 5% of them are probably actively in a relationship at the time of the polling. Right?
Okay, yeah, yeah. So you've brought up another selection bias, which is actually like countering what I'm saying. So, um, a lot of guys who watch our channels are going to be in their late teens, early 20s, and they're not necessarily going to be trying to date the women in their late 20s. Some will, obviously we do have some older audience members, but I think the last time I checked my age demographics of my channel, the most of the guys are between 18 and 25, in which case, the selection bias will be, that there's a lower percentage than 18 of women who are, say, 18 to 25 with 10 partners compared with women who are 25 to 29, that it might be like 35% of women in that age bracket have 10 or more partners, if you know what I'm saying.
Yep.
Yeah, so with that selection bias, that sort of implies that there's less women in the effective dating market for some of my viewers, that they're dealing with these women with high body counts. But in terms of other selection biases, I think that it's more likely that they're going to be dealing with these women, because the women with the higher body counts are also more likely to be going out to nightclubs and dating multiple guys at a time, have all of the dating apps installed, have 20,000 followers on Instagram, like a bunch of thirsty simps constantly hitting up their inbox. Like, I've seen it. I've seen these women, the women that I know in my life who have the highest body counts, on their phone, on Snapchat, Instagram, it will literally like say 100+ messages, like notifications. The vast majority of them from guys. Meanwhile, Sarah, who goes to the library to read her book, like, she's not talking to any guys, and she doesn't have a high body count. She might even be a virgin. Like, she's not interacting with the guys in the dating market, and who are our age demographic. So based on that selection bias, I would say that in terms of the effective dating market, the 18% is actually being underrepresented at this point.
True. So based on the math you and I have agreed on, 18% of women between 18 and 29 have 10 plus partners. Agreed?
18% between
That was the
18
number
and
you said, right?
29%. Yeah.
I just want to make sure I got
have
that
10
right.
plus partners. Yeah, that's
Okay,
right.
and
Yeah.
then you granted me, we don't know, but let's assume 5% are dating right now, which is probably...
Wait, 5%? Only
That's what you said.
5% in relationships? It's going to be way more than that.
No. In the
Like-
18%, only 5%, like of the 18%, 5% of those women with the 10 plus body counts are probably in a relationship at the time.
Oh, no. It'd be less than that. A lot of these
Somewhat.
women that have high body counts, like, they're just on the carousel. They're not in relationships, and they're not looking for relationships. They're just living the
the
single life.
sociosexual women. Yeah, so probably about 10% are sociosexual. That's kind of what we see maintained pretty much standard across most cultures, is 10% of men and women are sociosexual in general. They're just having sex with everyone, and specifically each other. They're not fucking the rest of us. They're fucking each other, right? They run typically in upper class circles. They're always interacting with one another. So if of the 18%, 10% of them are sociosexual. They're not interacting with the men that you're talking about. They're not going home with them. They're not having sex with them. They're having sex with the fuckboys and giga chads, right? 5% are probably dating, which means 3% of your entire 18% 10 plus men are the proverbial dating market available that your men might run into. So 3% of women that they run into might be...
Wait, just run me by those numbers again. What was your maths there?
18% have 10 plus
Yeah.
partners.
Yes.
Probably of those, most of them are sociosexuals. We agree that 10% of the population are sociosexual. That's what the data
Yes.
shows, at least.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that means a large portion of that 10 plus partner, 18%, is accounted for by the 10% of sociosexual. That leaves 8%
and
left.
why does that mean that they're not in the broader dating market?
So
Like,
what
I think
we
that's just a
see-
bit far-fetched, because these women that I've
That's
seen
just the
with
data.
100+ notifications on their phone from guys,
Yeah.
like, they're indiscriminate. They're not only selecting the other men who are also sociosexuals, they are mainly actually casting their net to simps. They're just soaking up
No.
a bunch of validation from, like, the
No,
bottom
that's just not the
90%
data.
guys.
I'm telling you right now,
Yeah,
that
they
is
might
not
not be
the
having
data.
sex with these guys, but they're definitely leading them on and, giving them
Well,
false
that's
hope.
different. Sure, but what we're talking about is sociosexual women are almost exclusively fucking sociosexual men, okay?
Yeah, okay, that's
Leading
fair
them
enough.
on
I agree with that
is
point.
definitely possible. It's definitely possible that they're keeping simps to keep paying for their stuff, which is shitty, right?
No,
That is
not
bad.
simps paying for their stuff, just validation seeking. Like, the amount of guys I see in these women's phones where, they just come up, they pop up at 11 o'clock at night saying, like, oh, how are you? How was your day? And, they're just waiting for the woman to respond. And these women, like, the selection bias is so extreme here, because they are essentially leading on 100 simps, who think that they've got a chance with this girl, who's in actual fact talking to a lot of guys. Meanwhile, Sarah, who reads her book, she's got no notifications going off on her phone because she doesn't talk to guys.
I would agree with the Sarah and dynamic. The issue is that like we can point at the sociosexual women and say that that's bad. The issue is that it's also bad for men to manifest and be chasing these types of women, right? Like I'm sure you would agree with that as well.
Yeah, it's bad because these women aren't good for relationships.
Right. So one really interesting thing that you might actually find interesting, you talked a little bit about how sluts have lower standards for looks. What we see of sociosexual women, so women who actually prioritize short-term dating strategy, these women are the only women that select for physical attractiveness more
Wait,
than
hold on a
anything
second.
else.
When did I say that? When did I say that women who have higher body counts are less selective for looks? When did I say
When you
that?
talked with Alex in a debate, you basically were talking about how sluts who would be willing to go on a date with Indian PE, the only reason they'd be willing to is because sluts are ran through, and therefore sluts, while like most girls might have a 7 looks requirement, sluts will drop it to 5. What I'm telling you is that the data shows these sociosexual women are more selective on looks.
Oh yeah, no. I still stand by what I say. For like, especially when it comes to one night stands. Like, I've even heard women say myself that, oh, if I want to have a one night stand with a guy, he needs to be at least a 6. But other women, if they, they wouldn't have a one night stand with a guy unless it was like some giga chad because they're a lot more conservative.
Right. So in general, when we poll women on dating strategy, all women, almost all of them, prefer long-term dating strategy. They are selecting men that they think they can be in long-term relationships. Of the women who are interested in high levels of casual sex, which will be the same women who have a 10 plus body count for the most part, these women are the ones selecting for looks the most. So the 304s, your dudes aren't going to get with anyways because they're selecting on looks the most. Your long-term dating strategy girl, which is most women, there's no emergence of attractiveness over the other markers. They seem to value a whole bunch of markers like intelligence, emotional stability, right, financial stability, all pretty much similar. They're looking for the same things, regardless
I
of
don't
their
really know
fertility.
if that's true or not because in my experience, the women that have been easiest to seduce are the women that have the highest body counts. Like, and I'm not the best looking guy in the world. I'm probably quite representative of your average guy in terms of looks. But the women that are, clearly the most conservative, like if you try to pull them on a night out, try to persuade them to go back to your apartment or whatever, they're way more likely to be flaky about it and say no, just because they don't really roll that way. But a
Yeah.
woman who's got a really high body count, like she's just so much easier to persuade, and like she's a lot more fickle, and she'll just go along with whatever because like that's just her lifestyle. Like, and yes, I'm not the best looking guy in the world, but she would still do it just because that's what she does.
So I hear that you're saying that. What I'm saying is that these sociosexual women are the women leading on tons of men. They have all of the options. They have their DMs being blown up. And what they're selecting for is looks exclusively. They're not just settling for 5s and 4s because they want to get dick. That's just not happening. Because as most people in the black pill would agree, women have more options than men. The issue is that most women aren't looking for sex. Most women are looking for dating relationships. But women who are just looking for sex, they have the choice of the crop. They can get whatever they want, which means these women absolutely are selecting only the most attractive men. The issue is that these are the sluts. These are the women that you're saying that you don't want anyways. Long-term relationship women, women who are looking to date, are selecting on a whole bunch of other things, and attractiveness doesn't emerge as the number one predictor of who they select on any study.
Yeah, I would say what you're saying is partly true. Like the women that are, in my experience, like best suited for relationships, they're not hyper fixated on like wanting an attractive guy. They're more likely to value his intelligence or shared interests, like because they know each other for a warm approach. But then again, I think this comes down to selection bias because women that are on Tinder are way more likely to filter down guys because of looks. And I think it's mostly the lower relationship quality women that would even do something as downloading Tinder. Like, I'm not sure how many people specifically have Tinder installed on their phone or what percentage of women have ever installed
About
Tinder, but I would
20%.
guess it's about, I was going to say it was more like 40 or 50%. But
20% of women will have
if it's only
Tinder on their phone.
20%, like those is 20% have it installed now or have ever?
Actively, yeah. 20% of women who have it actively installed and are using it. Yeah.
Okay.
Lots of people
Okay.
try
Yeah.
Tinder
So,
and then are like, "Fuck this shit," and they leave.
oh, okay. Yeah. So I would anticipate that it's probably like 50% have ever used it.
I think
The
so.
other
I think
50%.
it's about 50% have tried Tinder once. Women have a much
Okay.
higher report of being dissatisfied with Tinder, which is why most of them leave it.
Oh yeah, and that's how you get the ratio. That's really skewed because there's 3 times as many men on Tinder than there are women. Because as you just said, that a lot of women get fed up with it and then they leave. Why
Yeah,
guys
so
don't
online
think the
dating
same
is
thing and
terrible.
come to the same conclusion, I've got no idea. Maybe guys are just a lot more thirsty and cling on to hope.
It's probably rejection's easier online. Like if a girl ghosts
Yeah.
you, it's like a different thing than if you go up to a girl and she's like, "Ew," like that feels holistically different. The bars are different. That would be my guess for men.
Yeah, or guys are just like, running the numbers on it. They think they're eventually going to luck out or something like that. But anyway, that's besides the point. So, of the other 50% of women that have never used Tinder, never installed it on their phone, the main way that they're going to be meeting guys, besides cold approach, is going to be warm approach. And inherently through that, they're going to be
Like
selecting.
through friends, for non-red pill language people, through friends and family and like work and stuff like that. Is what you mean when you say warm approach. I'm just clarifying for the chat. I'm just clarifying for the chat.
Guys, I want to do like a 10-minute like warning basically because I want to try to keep this like around 2 hours or less so it's digestible. So you guys can still keep going, but I just want to give you guys a heads up that we're getting into the ending stage of the debate.
Okay, no, I think that's perfect. I was actually anticipating this being about 2 hours anyway, so I'm glad you said that. But anyway, just to finish my point, so the women that are meeting guys through warm approach, like their selection bias is going to be that they are, just naturally, like there's no, forced decision making going on here. They're naturally going to be more selective based on personality, intelligence, shared interests, things like that, as opposed to the 50% of women who've ever used Tinder, or the 20% of women who are currently on Tinder, which by nature are going to be mainly selecting for guys based on looks.
Sorry, I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. I got distracted by something that popped up in my ear. What you're saying is 50% of women aren't using Tinder. Are you saying, just to make sure I'm summarizing it, are you saying that the 50% of women who are not using Tinder are probably not selecting on looks, or with warm approaches, they're selecting more on looks? Just to make sure I'm understanding.
So they are not on 50% are not using Tinder. So the alternatives will be that they're doing warm approach, and therefore, because they're doing warm approach, they're selecting less for looks.
Yes.
Which, not completely disregarding looks. Looks is still important in warm approach.
Yes. Prerequisite.
But
it's always a prerequisite for sure.
Yeah, it's always a prerequisite.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's that there's still going to be elements of other factors now coming into the equation a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, this is really great. I think this is where you and I will jive, and me and Alec, and me and you will fight against Alex. Not that we need to open that, but like, this is why I tell people constantly, dating apps are not where it's at. Dating apps force women to make. I think your recent video you go about this. Dating apps force women to select on things that they're not as interested on selecting on. All they can select on to tell whether you're like a decent guy is your photos, which like are so fake. Like, because most guys get dating advice about how to have really good photos and stuff. So it's terrible for women. They don't like it. Whereas in like these warm approaches, you're right. What seems to really map on for like what women are going to be attracted to is emotional stability, right? They really like men who provide them an element of emotional stability, kind of that protectiveness a little bit, right? A prerequisite of looks. We might differ on how high that requisition is. I think it's not super high. I don't think it's like 3, but I don't think it's like 7. I don't know where you would sit it at. And they often select on like stability markers. So competence, education, training, or income is often like markers of stability that women look for.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. I mostly agree with that.
Okay. Thanks. Welcome to the Omni Pill Wheat Waffles.
Is there any other topics that we're due to discuss?
Well, you said 10 minutes, and I think any other topic we crack.
Yeah, I think it would take. Yeah, let's do maybe closing statements, like 1 minute closing statements.
I haven't really got anything to say as a closing statement. I don't usually do.
That's right.
My debates usually aren't this formal, even on my own channel. I never really worry about.
Okay, all right.
But if Erudite has anything to say as a closing statement, that's fine.
You know, welcome to the Church of the Omnipill. We have T-shirts. I can send you one if you want to wear it. Not actually, but
Oh,
yeah,
so
it seems.
that's the real purpose of the closing statement, just where people get an opportunity to plug their merch.
Yeah,
Their,
that's about it. I mean, I don't actually have Omnipill merch or anything. I'm memeing exclusively right now.
okay, fair enough. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I'll
I don't
actually
run a church called the
I'll
Omnipill.
assist with that. So if you guys like what We Waffles has to say, go and check out his channel. We Waffles, he has some good videos. I react to some of his videos. Even though me and We Waffles disagree, I think there's a mutual respect, and I think there's good content. So if what he's saying resonates with you, then go and subscribe to his channel. If what Kyla says, i.e., NotsoErudite, says resonates with you, then go subscribe to her channel. She also has really good content. I watched some of her videos. I've never actually reacted to a Kyla video, but I think that's probably because we just agree too much. But maybe I will at some point. But anyway, so yeah, so show them support. I think this was a good debate. It was very respectful. It was cordial. It was kind of the antithesis of pretty much most of the PWF debates. But it's refreshing to see like a nice intellectual discussion rather than "you're a fraud, I hate you." So yeah, good stuff. Cool. Anyway, guys, we're going to be back later on tonight where I'm interviewing James Marshall. Should be fun. You guys have been asking for this interview for quite a while. It's finally happening, so it's going to be a good time. Yeah, that's basically it. And then also we got a really cool debate on Tuesday. I'm going to be debating President Sunday, your BFF, Kyla. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to be, hosting a debate between Allende and Destiny. That should be fun as well. So a lot of good stuff. Okay. Appreciate y'all. Have a good night, guys.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for
See
chatting
you
with
later.
me today.
For sure.